could just type in yes to the little question box down there so that I know that you can hear me, please, before we start. Thank you. I apologize for the slight delay in the start. We're having a little technical difficulty that we have now resolved. The objective today is looking at best practices. This session will be recorded, so you will receive notification at the end when that recording is available. This is an interactive session, so your questions as we go forward. Susan Lester from Carroll EMC is going to be on the call. Their organization, as you'll find out in a minute, has been doing, from my point of view, some interesting things to improve member satisfaction. So that being said, your questions for what's taking place, what they know, is encouraged. The objectives, we're going to look at first call resolution and call monitoring and coaching today within this section. To those of you who are participating for the first time, MeasureX, we're an organization that works strictly with power and telephone utility organizations. Our objective is simply to help improve both the service and sales performance of those organizations. And most of what we do for those interactions is we look to measure current levels of service and sales within those organizations so that we can provide specific training. And in supporting training, as we all know, just because training has taken place, it doesn't mean that people can immediately incorporate those new skills into their day-to-day routines. So we do a lot with leadership and coach training to support that training investment. We've been working with the industry for 17 years now and have a variety of utilities across the U.S. that are past customers. I want to just briefly introduce our panelist, Susan Lester, from kind of her background. She is VP of Member Services, and they serve roughly about 50,000 members in Western Georgia. Now, one of the things that they have been able to achieve is a fairly high ACSI score consistently, and she will probably share some of the things that they do to achieve that result in this session. And the one thing that they are doing, and they have done very effectively, and that's why she is on this call with me today, is their first call resolution. Based on Touchstone's member tracking system, they are at the top of a group that is being tracked on first call situations. And she is going to share how they do it there to achieve that result. So let's look at first call resolution. And here's the question I have before we get started, so we just have a sense as we go forward. The question to you is this: do you currently have a documented procedure to resolve the customer's inquiry on the first call? If you do, hit yes, and if you don't, hit no for me, please. Let's just get a sense of where you are as organizations. Okay. So let's see. So roughly right now, according to the survey, 64% of you do not currently have some type of documentation. And I think Susan can share with you some ideas from her side as to kind of what they're doing in that interaction. One of the call center research groups, SQM, based on the research they've done recently, said for every 1% improvement in first call resolution, there's a 1% improvement in customer satisfaction. They also found out that customer satisfaction drops average of 15% every time as the customer has to call back because that issue wasn't resolved in that first conversation. So let me give you a little background of how they have accomplished what they have and what their objective is first call resolution. In 2012, they formed a team across the company to track performance in first call resolution. Now, as you know from your organizations and from the organizations I interact with, getting all of the departments engaged to work to resolve that, so that case of handoff responsibility, ownership, which department has the knowledge and expertise, that is not an easy task. And they identified across the section some of those the more difficult member interactions to focus on. Between both internal and external interactions, because naturally there's a lot of, in any kind of member interaction, there's a variety of different departments that could be engaged. They identified what they were to work on the top ones. And they created a script on what to say and how to actually handle those issues when they called in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring Susan onto the call with me, because I want her to share for what they've achieved, how they've accomplished that in the last 3 years since they've started. So let's bring her onto the call. Susan, are you with me?
I am. Thank you, Dave.
Okay. Can everyone on the other end of her hear the call? Confirm that she's on the call. Somebody just give me a yes in the question box so that I know that you are all hearing her besides myself, because we had a little technical difficulty. Great. So, Susan, tell the participants about your Right Steps program. You know, why you set it up, kind of give them a little understanding of what it is and how it improved that first call resolution at your organization, if you would, please.
Sure. Our corporate vision has been to exceed our members' expectations for several years, but we noticed that our members' expectations were shifting and changing, and it just wasn't enough that we kept the power on, that we needed, we just weren't able to deliver on some of their expectations. We had reps that would receive calls that we maybe didn't have the answer for, and often would kind of transfer it or drop it into someone else's voice email that was on vacation, and then they didn't get it, and they'd call back. And so it just came from some complaints that we knew that we didn't have the information up front to deal with it, and there was just really no ownership, you know, company-wide. It was always someone else's problem.
So getting all of the departments involved, I know from my experience, as many organizations I interact with across the U.S., that getting all the departments to take ownership on their part and work together on figuring out the best way to do that is not an easy task. How did you accomplish that with as large as you are as an organization, as many departments as you have?
Well, I have to just credit our CEO and just great leadership. He just challenged us, his senior staff, and then he brought it down into our managers and our supervisors, and just said, we don't really have anyone there to model. There was not a book on how to do this at our company, and he really challenged us to figure out what that meant to us. And so I think, you know, we brought in everything, you know, from clerks to vice presidents, and had representation from all of the departments, but we had the support, and I guess people just bought into it because it was theirs. You know, they were developing it. Have we changed it 50 times? Oh, yes. And do I think it's to the better each time? Absolutely. But I just think it was the vision of our CEO at the time, and it's truly made a difference.
Thank you. So what I know is this. Naturally, your customer service team, they handle a lot of those first calls, dispatch. There's a couple key departments. Now, naturally, they know about different interactions more than others, but in this case, if I'm the first point of contact, and even from my knowledge, I sure do not know a lot of those other more in-depth functions that I may not be familiar with. How did you get on that first call where I don't have the answer? How did you create that so that that call in many cases didn't get shifted, or if it did get shifted to somebody else, it was within that call? So how'd you do that?
Well, we took the top 25, you know, from earlier. You said we took the top 25 what we thought were high member issues and just tried to dig down into them. And what we realized is that we had two first contact resolutions. We almost had an internal and an external. While our goal was to be able to answer all the questions with that first member contact when they reached out to us the first time, you know, it's impossible for customer service reps to know the answers to all the questions. And so we kind of had an internal and an external. Like I said, our goal was to be able to, but when we could not, we had a different first contact resolution internally. So we developed this really sophisticated document called the Who to Call list, and our managers and supervisors and foremen, everybody was a part of it. So if it was a right-of-way issue, we didn't say, I didn't say who to call. The right-of-way foreman said, you know, you call me, and if you can't get me, you call so-and-so. And so it was his responsibility to notify that employee. And so we kind of had those two different pieces. And then if we had to transfer the call to get the answer, we made sure it was a successful handoff, and we wrote a standard on how we define successful handoff, and that we considered it still a first contact if we had to transfer that call to staking, but we never leave a call in voicemail. We stay on the phone, and then we follow up with that employee to make certain that they were able to resolve or to answer the question for the member.
Thank you. Last one in regards to first call resolutions. What do you think the top three things that have actually helped you achieve that rating on first calls? What do you think are the most impactful things you've done as an organization?
Well, and again, I'm going to give our CEO credit. We realized that we didn't have the right mixture of supervisors. We had got the opportunity to hire 2 additional supervisors, and we were using the same model as we use in operations for our foreman and supervisor ratio. So we are using that same format. And we started follow-up calls, and now every 100%, or so I hope, service order that is generated from our member, any call that comes in and they want new service, or if they want an outside light, whatever it is, we do a follow-up call to make certain that they received everything they wanted from us. Was there anything that we did that we could, that we could still do for them? Did we, handle their property with care if we were on there? But it is split between operations and customer care with making those phone calls. And then we do a thing that we developed, door hangers, and we use a door hanger to put out, we phone out for right-of-way if we're going to be doing any maintenance, right-of-way maintenance, or we phone out to them, and we've done that for years. But we started doing a door hanger, and it says that we're coming, and it says what to expect. In our call out, we have kind of tried to reset our members' expectations by saying the crew that cuts is not the crew that cleans. So, in a day or so, there'll be another crew. So we've kind of tried to reset some expectations there. And then I guess it's probably the who to call list. I know that sounds silly, but just having a name and a phone number and knowing that they're expecting that call. I think those are probably, and just, I've got great manager and supervisor in customer care, and it just makes a difference.
From my side, I think your who to call list is one of the most effective things, because you have a variety of different people, and sometimes they aren't sure, depending on the type of call, where to actually direct that call so that it is handled. So I would agree with that one as Liz. Thanks for your input on those questions. So let's move on to the call monitoring side for just a moment, group. Why does a company need customer service standards? And my first and most important thing within any organization is, my experience is, the vast majority of people that work within your organization are doing the very best they can in their day-to-day interactions with your customers. They are operating from that skill set. And so if you're going to improve, if you're going to create more consistency within your company, within your team, then establishing what are those standards you expect. That's one of the things that Carroll EMC has set up, and she will speak to that in just a moment. And the next important thing is this: just because there's been standards established, are we actually working to coach those people? Because whether internally or externally, you have put people into a training environment. But the important thing is, just because they sat in the room doesn't mean they have the capability afterwards. And especially with dealing more emotional customer issues, that requires additional coaching and that accountability for demonstrating those standards. If we've provided training, we've provided coaching, the next step is making sure that those people are then using those. So moving on to the next part, before I bring her back in to talk about monitoring, here's the second question I have for you. And the question is, are you using recorded customer calls to monitor and coach your employees monthly? If you'd be so kind to give some input to that question. Okay, and the answer is 67% of you on this call are. That's a really good thing, and that is one of the highest numbers I have had in ever asking that question. So that being said, let's look at that aspect of interactions with coaching. For those of you that aren't, if you have call recording software on your phone system, my suggestion is that you start implementing that as a coaching tool. If you are on this call and do not have call recording software at your organization, if you're going to look to improve overall performance of your company, the smallest and one of the most effective investments you're going to make is to add that to your phone system. I have a couple of providers that offer that at a very nominal cost, and there again, depending on the phone system you have, it may be an easy add-on, but that is an important one. Why? Because we want to reinforce those standards that we have on a monthly basis with people to help them develop and make those what we'll call skills become behaviors that they can easily demonstrate day to day. The other thing though is this: if you have someone within your organization that is not meeting those standards, it becomes the most effective way to assist them. I just came from an organization in Tennessee, and I interacted with one individual in the company that was on the dispatch side from this organization. And his interaction with the members via phone were sadly in need of improvement. Now, the company had never done any coaching, had never shared any phone calls before. When I shared my first conversation that he had with a member just a couple days before, he understood what was missing in that interaction. And naturally, what we want to do is create what we'll call that ownership. So if you are not addressing what we'll call some kind of issue with one of your team interaction, then naturally they are just seeing that as that is acceptable. So change on call coaching is the most effective way to create that. So let's talk to the other side of what Carroll EMC was doing on call monitoring. They have an individual within their organization that is monitoring customer interactions on a regular basis. I was fortunate enough to meet this individual that most people in the company do not know. Okay? Her job is simply to identify if the calls that the organization is having with members every day, if they're meeting the company standards. The Supervisor then shares any of those calls that are identified as opportunities with the team. So to bring Susan back in to share how they're doing, what they're doing to achieve the results they have. Susan, from your standpoint, what prompted the company? How long has what we'll call your coaching and monitoring program been in place? What caused you to establish that monitoring and coaching program?
Well, it was our Right Steps program and just the whole first contact resolution. And what we found out, Dave, is sometimes our members aren't truthful, and they would say, "This is the 5th time I've called," and it was the 2nd time they called. Now that didn't make it acceptable, but the monitoring worked in our favor more often than it worked against us. But our member satisfaction score, we've always been, very important, and we've watched those numbers closely. But it had to be our first contact resolution. It just went hand in hand because, the truth is we all think we do a good job, and we do the good to great around here and talk about that daily. And it was just how to take it to that next level.
Thank you. So what are some of the standards that you have created when you implemented your monitoring and coaching program?
Well, probably the most important one that came out of the supervisor group and management group was our call flow. All our employees have a kind of a checklist of how and what our expectations are. We had talked it for years, and some people were just better at it than others, but we really didn't have that checklist. And then they knew that same type of checklist would be used for our monitoring to see if indeed they were meeting our expectations. And again, the silly who to call, which just seems so obvious to everyone, that was one of our, I think, most important standards that we have, and the whole accountability. But we've done everything from out-of-office replies that is a standard for the company on when you use it and what the expectations of you checking your email or returning calls or having someone else in place. And I guess those are probably the top ones.
So not only what happens on the calls in, but even for the people on the different departments is what some of the standards of whether it's an email reply, a voicemail reply, you establish some other standards even internally of what happens in member interactions, if I'm hearing you correctly.
That is correct, and those are company-wide.
Thank you. So based on the length of time you've had this program established, what have you noticed as a result of that monitoring and coaching, and how are you measuring it currently?
Well, our ACSI and our TSC scores, remain high, and they're not where we wish they were, but they, still remain high. And, we're not getting those phone calls of people were rude to me and they were short, they didn't know the answer, they transferred me and dropped the call. We have just, for months, we have not had those phone calls. We're getting emails and posting on social media that are right the opposite, really, thanking them for such great customer service, and we should hire more of this person, and we should do more of that, and I hope we're paying them well. I mean, really positive things coming out of it. And the coolest thing is they are sharing it with each other. And so we share it and we celebrate it as a group. But it's really nice when you hear one rep say, I just got a phone call and they spoke to one of my coworkers and they just wanted to say what a great job they did. And they really are bragging on each other, and they're bragging on departments. We've broken down a lot of those barriers.
How often will you coach a representative on a monthly basis as a norm?
We coach all employees, I mean, all customer service reps, and that's, I think, there's probably 25, 26 of those on monthly. We have, I think, 10 calls per rep that is monitored. And, I'm going to give you a plug, Dave. MeasureX has taken ours to a different level, and we're so excited about it because we actually coached on anything that they did that did not meet our expectations. And so now we're happy to say that we have learned to coach and have them almost coach themselves. It's just been such a crazy improvement. But, it's not about catching them doing something wrong. Our monitoring is not, and they don't, we don't want to get anyone in trouble. We just want to get better, and that's the only get in all of our call monitoring, and they all know it. And it has been, it's changed the morale of the department. It's changed the morale of the company.
Thank you. So, based on what we've covered, as we come to the end of this session, are there any specific questions that you have either for Susan or myself? If you would just type into that little question box down there at the bottom, and as we bring this to an end, I'll have her or myself address anything that may have come up based on your thoughts as you listen to this session. Give you a minute to put any questions in there that you have. Okay, I just have one that was sent to me, and so I'm going to present this one to you, and that is, how do you get your supervisors to make coaching a priority and all the day-to-day tasks that they have? Because I know from my experience that's sometimes can be a struggle for people. How do you get them to do it consistently? How have you made that happen at your company?
It is a standard, and it is accountability, and if my supervisors are not doing it, my manager's not doing her job, and if the manager's not doing it, then I'm not doing my job. It's accountability, and you have to make it a priority. It's not, some days it's tougher than others, and we don't do it, it's not like we do 5 calls a day and you have to get them in that day, or 10 calls, but it is, you do have to make it a priority. It doesn't come easy.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts from any of you? Okay, then this brings this session to an end. Thank you all for participating. Susan, thank you for your part in sharing what's happening at your organization today. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Bye.